And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to La Tertulia Equestre. We have a very good show today. It's going to be an experienced rider with all the successes in the world. Everyone loves her. But before we start, we want to thank Ecuestre Digital for all your support, for all the networking and the technology behind La Tertulia Equestre, and Mariela and Estefania Godoy for all the subtitles, and also Cavalarium.com with Carolo López Quesada for all the support in the distribution in the European market. So let's wait no more. Let's put in screen our fellow partners. Leopoldo Palacios, how are you? I know you just arrived from Traverse City. Hopefully everything was good over there. And we have Santiago Varela from Madrid, Spain. Hello, Santi. Good to see you again. And Carolo López Quesada also in Madrid. And today we have a spectacular show. Like I said before, we have Margie Engle. I mean, everyone knows Margie. She is famous. She is amazing. Quite a horseman. Excellent rider. And you know what, Margie? Let me take a minute of your time to give a brief resume, even though everyone knows you. But you are an Olympic rider, medalist in Pan American Games in Winnipeg and Dominican Republic, AGA Rider of the Year 10 times, 11 World Cup finals, more than 200 Grand Prix wins. You actually jumped 2 meters 36 in a puissance. I mean, silver medal at the World Equestrian Games. And this goes on and on and on and on. I mean, I saw an interview where the adjectives they use is speed, bravery, tenacity, and strength, and seemingly endless positivity. I mean, come on, Margie, you're amazing. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. How are you?
Good, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Well, amazing. You know, I live in Wellington, so was Leopoldo, and you are originally from Miami, South Florida, and your home is called Wellington now. And everyone, every time you go into the ring, everyone just claps, everyone just whistles, screams. Here is Margie. Everyone roots for you. So, but you come from a middle family that in South Florida, which I understand it was not an equestrian tradition, and you managed to work and then start your way up, and now top rider of the world. Can you take us through those years, how it all started?
Actually, my best friend from grade school, she rode horses out at the stable where I started to ride, and I fell in love with the horses at an early age. Since I was young, I always loved sports and I loved animals, and it seemed like a great combination of the two. My brothers were playing football and other sports that women weren't allowed to play in, but I still played all the sports with them. But I wanted to get into a sport that was my own kind of, and no one in my family were involved with horses at all. But my best friend rode, and I went out with her, and I ended up kind of working around the stables in exchange for riding lessons and for pleasure rides. And I worked in their dog and cat kennels. And when I got a little bit older, when I was like 10 or so, they let me start grooming the horses and cleaning the stalls, which was a big upgrade from cleaning the dog and the cat kennels. Those are not quite as nice as cleaning a horse stall because they eat meat. But I was really excited. I came home all excited because I told my mother and father that they let me clean the horse stalls, and now I get to groom the horses. So it was a big upgrade, and I just loved being around them. It was a real passion.
And sorry, I had to put mute on myself. And well, everyone knows your history and all the years you have dedicated to the sport. You're a great ambassador. And now that I see you have a lot of blue ribbons, red ribbons, you're in Traverse City. So everything is looking like it's back to normal now. I mean, is everything back to normal, or how are the show's atmosphere right now?
I don't know if, I guess it's our new normal. I'm just glad to be back out and being able to compete. We're very lucky in our sport that we were able to continue riding at the farm, and I kind of enjoyed it. It was kind of a nice nice downtime to get back to the basics and get some of my young horses going and work with some of the babies. And I got to some of the weanlings I got to spend time with, which is how I started. When I started, because of my size and I didn't have my own horses, they needed someone to kind of be like the test dummy and break all the babies at the farm. And I was small and always small, so they had me get all the young horses and then also some of the race horses. And so I love spending time with the babies, just even on the ground, just being with them. So it was fun during the downtime to do that, and we got to keep riding. So now being at the horse show is great, but I did enjoy the time at home too.
Oh, that it's always good to see on the positive side of things. And before I let Leopoldo and Santi and Carolo, that I'm sure they have plenty of questions, I have one question more for you. You're a true believer that dressage makes a difference in jumping horses, and you work very closely with Lisa Wilcox, who is a very known Grand Prix rider. So, are you still working with Lisa? Is dressage still a big part of your training for the horses?
Absolutely. Lisa's a big part of our team, and I depend on her a lot. She's actually working my top horses right now in Florida. They're still there, Deacus and Royce, and some of the other ones are still home, even though it's very hot. But she's a big part of the team, and I've always been a big believer, even as a younger rider. We always had a good basic learning in dressage, and it helps for the rideability of the horses. It helps in the adjustability of the horse. Now with the courses getting so technical, you can't just run down there, and they have to be rideable. They've got to be able to lengthen when they want, and you got to be able to collect and shorten them with the courses. And it's all basically good flat work that gets the rideability and get the horses coming up from behind. If they get there, I feel like at the right balance and with the right energy behind, you're going to have a lot more options at different distances where you can jump from. And the dressage is basically getting them the balance correct, getting their hind ends engaged, which is what we need to jump the courses and jump bigger jumps. You don't maybe need it as much for the smaller jumps, but it's still nice to have. Even with the hunters, I had years ago when I was doing the hunters, I had a dressage rider. Patty's sister Phyllis used to work the horses for some of the horses I did for her. And even with the hunters, they jumped amazing after she worked them. They always rode better, their balance was better, and it was easier to be smooth with them with the hunters. And the jumpers, I think it's a big advantage for them. Good flat work. And Lisa's amazing. I love working with Lisa. She explains things. She knows the horses inside and out. She feels every little detail. She explains things very well. And besides just helping me, she helps some of my riders that flat the horses in between. She's given lessons to Beth that works for me, and also Bernie, and she's great with helping not just myself, but some of the other riders, which is very beneficial because I can't work all the horses myself all the time, and it helps when Lisa's not there when we're away at the horse shows when they have to work them some. So it's definitely a big plus for me.
Well, for sure, the plan is working because you're having great success. So, Leopoldo, I know you're dying to ask a question to Margie.
Margie, I follow you for a long time and I see you how your horses, and you had a lot of horses in your career. But many of them are big horses and you are not a big person. How this is a casualty, or you like the big horses? But normally it's something that is very peculiar that see you always in a big horses.
It honestly is kind of, they just seem to find me. I'm not that picky. People don't remember the smaller horses that I had. They all think that I look for large horses, but that's what was sent to me from an early age. I was happy to have any horse to ride to do the jumps. I even rode a pony when I was younger in the open jumper division. So it wasn't, there was a large pony that didn't have a tail, and its name was called Shoe Fly. And I showed that one in the open jumpers back in the day in Miami at Tropical Park and at the fairgrounds. But a lot of people sent me these large horses, and then by word of mouth, that's what people thought I looked for. So every big horse they would call me to look at, And that's what a lot of different customers of mine and clients sent me. I did have some owners that they preferred larger horses, but ideally, I prefer a horse more around 16-1, 62, kind of short coupled, a little bit uphill. And I've had a lot of really successful horses that aren't that large. Salute was not a large horse. He was compact. He was probably 16-2. Alvareto was only around 16 hands, Hidden Creek's Alvareto, and he won a lot. And I took him to Pan Am games. Hidden Creek's Laurel was about 16-1 or 2. She was one of my favorite mares. I've had all different shapes and sizes, but what people remember the most, I think, are the large ones. And a lot of the horses that I was sent, they were these huge kind of horses that nobody else wanted. And that's what I ended up with, just because that's what was sent to me. But I was just happy to ride anything that could jump the jumps. You could have probably put me on a camel and I would be happy if it could jump. So I wasn't always that picky because I didn't own my own horses. I rode what people sent me. So a lot of them, they weren't horses that I picked out. They were horses that were sent to me. And most of them, when I started, they were all 4, 5, and 6-year-olds that people had bred. And a lot of breeding farms sent me horses that they thought the horses could do the bigger classes. And they didn't start off so big, and then they grew as they got older. But that wasn't ideally what I looked for, but I end up having a lot of large horses.
But I think this, in combination, what you say about the dressage, is the only way that you can manage that size of horses. If you don't have a very good dressage, but you are a very fast rider too, and going fast with a big horse, with a large horse, is difficult. The horses need to be very well broken and very well on dressage. But and you are not that strong to can handle these things. You put a lot of hours for sure in dressage, and you believe today many riders are like we see catch riders years ago, but you are a person to have a lot of being. You develop a lot of horses in your career. I see that you develop a lot of horses, and you believe that this is a sport of horse and rider combination, and you need to grow with your horses. Your horses need to grow with you.
That's basically all that I had when I was starting out. I always had young horses to develop, and when I first started, everything got sold as soon as they looked like they were going to do the bigger jumps. And I was fortunate enough to when I had Daydream, I put a syndicate together, and my father helped me. And he was the only horse I ever owned a part of, but I had him since he was 5 years old, and I didn't want to sell him. And I think, so we did put the syndicate together, and we kind of developed together. He was my first real Grand Prix horse, and I didn't know any better. I was doing the Grand Prix with him by the time he was 6 or 7, and he was very large, so I had to get good basics with the dressage work, because he wasn't just tall, he was big and long. So I had to get him broke enough, because as you say, I'm not the tallest person in the world, a little bit vertically challenged, as they say. But the more rideable he was, the more it helped me. And as we developed together, we developed a trust. And I felt like I could ask him almost anything. He trusted me to do things that probably he shouldn't have done. Same with, I had Salute. Almost all the Grand Prix horses I had starting out, they were all young. So we kind of grew together, and they learned to develop a trust in me and me in them. And it was really nice, because most of the horses I rode when I was starting, they were all catch rides, and I didn't get to live with them. I just rode them at the horse shows. But the Grand Prix horses that I started getting sent to me later, I did have all as 4, 5, 6-year-olds. So, and I think they really learned to trust you. And I was young enough, and Spank, who was helping me, would ask me to do crazy turns and crazy distances leaving outstrides, and I believed they could do it, and they believed in it. So we kind of grew together, and they would try for me and do things that probably they shouldn't have.
Margie, Royce
is one of the best horses in the world for me. Is it true that you have a contract and you cannot sell the horse? Is it true?
When we first bought him, that was in the contract. When we first bought Royce, I bought him as a 7-year-old. I saw him when he was showing as a 6-year-old with Lubov, and I couldn't get her to sell him to me first. And then, because she had been offered a lot of money for him from quite a few different riders. And I did help her sell some other horses, so she kind of had a soft spot for me, and she said, I will sell him to you, but I don't want you to develop him to be resold. If you keep him, then I will sell him to you, because I want you two to be together, and I want you to have him for his career. And if it was in the contract, he could be sold, but then she still got a percentage if we did sell him to keep us from not selling him. So it was in the contract that he was not supposed to be sold to someone else unless she got a very large portion of the sale. But which suited me fine, because it was kind of at this point in my career, I kind of wanted to keep him, and he was young, and we kind of grew together, and we formed a relationship, and luckily because of him being a stallion, I can do breeding with him also. And it was kind of nice to have one that I didn't have to have always for sale. So he was one that I became part of the family. He's really a sweet horse too, so I enjoy being around him. He's kind of a pet. He's a stallion, but he doesn't really act like one. He acts more like a big dog. And when I come in the barn, he likes me to scratch him, and he likes attention. He likes playing with everything from the broom to the ball he has. He'll grab my phone. He'll grab the stick. Everything is a joke to him. So he's fun to have around, and he's very amusing and very enjoyable.
Margie, taking into account the description that you did about the courses and the technicalities during you have been explained before, what is your opinion about the evolution of the courses during the last 10, 15 years, let's say, and where we should go in theory, in your opinion? Okay, because there is many times there is a discussion where some people believe that the things that happened before are better than how the technicality is applied today. Today, in my opinion, the technicality is more or less related to the balance of the horses and the control of the horses and the understanding between the riders and the horses. However, how do you see the evolution, and to where or from now where we should go?
I don't know that I'm one to say where it should go, but I like the evolution of the sport, and it's always going to be changing in every industry, and I think a lot of changes are for the best, and some are for maybe not always the best, but I think we're going in a good direction. I would like to see, before the courses were much larger, I think, but they used heavier material and maybe not as technical. I do like the fact that the courses are technical, because it's where the rider and the horse have to work well together. It's not just bravery, it's how well that you work as a team and the rideability between the two of you. I would personally like to see maybe a little less of the material being so much like the old rub classes that they had, where you just touch them and they come down. But I do like the part where you have to have your horse adjustable, where they listen to you and open up their stride when you want them to, and they can compress and shorten the stride at the right time. And they have to think, and it's how well you both respond to the courses together. It's that challenge is great, because I think it's more of not just having a good horse, but how well the two of you communicate together. And like you said, how good their balance is. You can't do that if your horse is just unbroken running around on its forehand. So I think that direction is quite good for the sport. The delicate part, I know you have to have, because the sport's gotten better and better. But I do like the technical aspects quite a bit. The delicate part, I would like to see maybe a little less of that at times, and sometimes when they use those little tiny things with the upside down cups, maybe, because they almost get blown away.
I could agree with you. I fully agree with you that the delicate part need to be adjusted. Above all, when now with the change of the hind boots and everything, this need to be adjusted a little bit. This is my personal view also.
Well, the technical part I think is really good. I like I mean, that's where the real riding comes in. I think that shows how well the horse and rider are tuned in together, and it shows the work that you've done with the horse, your homework, and the connection you have, and how the rideability is. I think that's really important. To just run down and jump massive jumps is not. There's a lot of horses that can do that. But I like, they say there's courses for horses and courses for riders. I like it to be more of a rider's course where you have to think. It's more challenging as a rider to have to think. Like last week, we had a couple of courses where you had to ride forward down one line, and then really steady for the next. Like you had the steady 3 strides to an in and out where you had to get your horse right back and collected, but with enough impulsion to jump out of the in and out that was a little bit scopy coming out. And even though the jumps were only 1.45 meters, it still was technical enough, and the riders had to think, which I think is very good for the sport. Teaches us to ride better, teaches the horses to listen better, and it's important for us to grow as riders because we're always learning in the sport. And like Leopoldo said, what was nice with the horses, I brought some young horses, and from the first week, they learned to the second week. And I think that's important for bringing young horses along, and for us as riders to keep us always learning and us thinking, so we don't get stale. I think that's important as riders, no matter what age you are.
César.
I don't know if I answered your question, but I hope so.
Oh, no, you answered the question very clear. And
Okay.
The question here is that the delicate part of the fences most likely need to be adjusted, as you mentioned, and I also trust in this. I strongly believe that I have is that this need to be adjusted. They cannot continue in this way because with this way we can destroy the sport. It is much better to work and honestly to do exactly what you have explained. It is much more work for the course designer when everything need to be connected and need to be related on. Is harder work for the course designer, but this is exactly our job. This is what it is. No, this is the sport really.
Oh, for sure. I don't know that I would want a course designer's job. I think that's one of the hardest jobs at the horse show. But they can make or break a horse, and I think it's very difficult. But you can, it doesn't matter whether sometimes 1.40 meter course you can make more difficult than 1.60 meter track, depending on how much you have to think and the horses their adjustability. And I think that's important, not to just for the horse's longevity and to developing new young riders and horses. But I think it's good for the rider to have to think and the horse. And it shows their education and our education, getting the horses adjustable.
Definitely, there are some courses on 145 and 140 that are much more complicated and much more complete than the 160 or 155 courses. Because when you need to adjust a competition for 145 or something like that, and you have a huge number of horses that can do without any issue, you need to adjust much more the balance of the horses from the number 1 to the number 14 or to the number 13, and you need to adjust and you need to connect everything that happened, including the turnbacks and everything that need to do. And you need to move the riders, and many times for the young riders and people without the experience, their own balance related to the balance to the balance of the horse, which is the key issue that they have. No? And you need to find that, but to find that you need to work a lot. There is not casual. When this happens, there is not casual.
No, as you said, it's a difficult job. I think the course designer's job is very, very difficult. It's way more difficult than what we have to do, for sure. But and as you said, everything's related. Like last week, we had a triple bar right by the in gate that you had to ride forward, and then he had a set of Liverpool coming in the running in a tight two stride, and on the back of the vertical coming out of the two stride, they're just very tight. So you open the horse up, you had to ride forward to the triple bar, and the horse, you still had to ride forward with the Liverpool in front of the jump, and then you had to have the horse contained to fit in the two strides with the backward Liverpool, and then the six was very steady to a wide oxer. But I loved it. I think, you know, it teaches us as riders to think and what we have to do, and it really educates the young horses. That's a lot for them to think about, where they have to open up, where they have to collect and sit back on their hind end. And those are courses where not just us as riders have to think, but the horses do. And I know it's difficult for you all to think of new things all the time, and it's a hard job, but you guys do an amazing job.
The only thing that I disagree with you is your work is much more complicated than our work. There is not, our job is easy related to your job. There is no question
a
on
lot
that.
more people. I don't know. I would definitely rather do what we're doing, because I think your job is way difficult. I don't think I could do it.
This is not the thing, but it is a much more complicated job. César.
I don't know. It depends on who you.
Margie, as a professional, you have different goals in your life. You have your financial goals, you have sporting goals, and when you start riding as a professional and you ride other people's horses, the better you do your job, the better the horse is, the more sellable it is, and most likely it's going to sell that horse, right? So when this comes to the point where the financial goal is higher than the sporting goal, or when the sporting goal needs to be more important than the financial goal. And I want to take this answer as an advice to the young professionals, the newer generations that are coming along, because I don't know what, when they start their career, what's more important and where they should focus on.
It depends, honestly, who you're riding for, and a lot of people. I rode for different professionals and for different people. That sometimes if you're riding for clients and you're making up horses for them, the easier you make them, and you have to train them a little differently than if you were going to ride them yourself. If you're making them up for a student and they have to learn to jump from different distances and go on their own, you try and make them think for themselves a little bit. If you're riding a horse that's a sale horse for a dealer, which I've had lots of horse dealers send me horses, the better the job you do to make them saleable and more rideable for different people, the more you sell, and then those dealers send you more horses to try and sell. So as a young professional, that was my job, was to make the horses as saleable as possible. So the rideability had to be easy enough for different people to ride, and they have to be competitive enough so you learn to go fast with them kind of quickly, because that way you get more attention for sales reasons. And even though I didn't maybe want to sell them when I was starting out, that was my job, and I had to understand that everything was for sale. When I started even riding the ponies, that was my job, and the better you do the job, the more that gets sold, the more people send you horses. And that was my job starting out. As I got a little bit older, and some people wanted to be in it for different reasons, if you have clients that you know what, I really enjoy this sport, and now the prize money has expanded so much from what it was a few years ago, they can actually make enough back and even make a little bit of income from the prize money for the Grand Prix. They want to maybe own them a little bit longer period of time. So for those owners, then they're not so quick to sell them. So it really depends on the individual owner, if they want to own one for their enjoyment, or if they want to own one to sell. And I think it's really important for you to have a good communication with your clients and with the different owners about what their objective is. If their objective is to sell, then you try and sell them, and you go to them with every offer you get. And you just have to be really open with the owners. If their objective is to have a nice horse to show in the big classes and they enjoy coming and watching them, which I've had some owners do that, then that's great. That's the best kind of owner you can have. And there's not as many. I was fortunate to have quite a few owners that like to do a little of both. They like to do some buying and selling, and as long as those horses paid for the Grand Prix horses and they paid for themselves, they would own the Grand Prix horses a little bit longer. So that was a big advantage. But I think as a young professional, your key is to have good communication with your owners and want to do right by them. If they want to buy them to sell, that's what you need to do. And that your owner and you have to have a very good communication process. If they're okay with owning them to have them and come watch them because their children ride or they just enjoy the sport, which is fantastic, that's the best kind of owner, then that's great. But you have to have an open communication. So and that's where you eliminate problems and have an honest and open relationship with your owners.
Now, you just mentioned owners as a very important piece in the equation of our sport, right? Do you think personally that we're giving enough recognition to the owners when you win an event, when you win a specific class? Are we giving enough recognition to the owners, or we should do more?
I think they definitely need to have more done for them. I've said this for years in a lot of our organizations, and I think they're trying, but without the owners, most of us riders wouldn't be there. Now the riders that start off that don't have the financial backing when they're starting out, without people in the sport that want to own horses for riders that are not from a big financial background, they need some recognition too. They need to get something back from this, and they do a lot for a lot of people, and I think they definitely deserve more recognition. I think they could be treated a little bit better at some places. Like it's all about the rider at places like the Olympics and Pan Am Games and places like that, and the owners of the horses, they're very, very important. And I know sometimes even as a rider it's difficult for us to say how much that they do mean for us, but I've always said that they definitely deserve more recognition than they get.
Thank you. Carolo or more, Leo? Mute, Leo. Mute.
Leo, el mute. Leo, el mute.
Excuse me, Margie, you for many years developed horses, and in this process to develop horses, you even develop riders, but you teaching riding too and training riders. And you enjoy teaching riders, or you enjoy more teaching horses, or you enjoy both and you are happy with the success of your riders? But I see you have a lot of students too.
I have to say honestly that when you bring a horse up from a young horse up to the Grand Prix level, or even up to just when it starts to do well at whatever level it's doing, and they learn so much, they're like a sponge how they soak things up. Even the babies, when I work with them, I probably got the most satisfaction from that as anything, because there's a certain bond that you get with the young horses that's hard to describe. I do enjoy teaching a lot of the students too, especially if they want to learn and they want to be good horsemen. That for me is nice to help someone coming up. Any whether it's a horse that's eager to learn or a rider that's eager to learn, and they enjoy the sport and it's more about the horse, I enjoy helping them. Those are the type of riders that I enjoy helping, that they really care about the animals. But I have to say the connection with the horses is probably for me the most meaningful, because the bond you get with them it's just so unspoiled. It's so real. It's hard to describe, but the horses kind of let you know if you're doing things correctly and you're not doing things correctly, and there's nothing phony about it. You either do things right and they let you know, and if you don't do things right, they let you know that too. So they're a good judge of how we're doing our job, and they have an unconditional caring about people, and as long as we don't destroy it, then you can progress and do quite a bit with them. But it's just they're amazing animals, and I love working with the animals. They're just amazing as animals and athletes. But I do enjoy helping both, especially if someone is enthusiastic about the sport and a rider, no matter what level, and they enjoy it. uh, I enjoy helping them too.
Margie, you don't think in the general of the situation, the young people losing a lot this part of horsemanship that is very important, the connection, the animal with the human and this. You don't think today the sport changing a little bit too much to using the horses more that have this kind of connection?
No, absolutely, and that's the part of the sport that's really difficult for me. I know even with some of my students, I try and get them to understand this is not a tennis racket. This is not a bicycle or a dirt bike. You need to spend time with them, not just up at the ring. You need to spend time with them at the barn. You need to develop a relationship, think like they do, learn their likes and dislikes. I try to get them to take them out for grass. I know it sounds silly, but just form a bond and form a relationship. And that's something when we were growing up, all the kids did. It didn't matter what kind of financial background they were from. They wanted to spend time with the horses. They wanted to groom their horses at home. They wanted to take them out for grass. They wanted to enjoy time together and get to know their horses inside and out. And that's what the true riders always did. And I was fortunate to have some really top junior riders that wanted to spend time back at the barn. Christina Kelly was always one that did a lot of work back at the barn. And I'm going to forget names, but different people that really enjoy the horses and think about them and the bond they have together and want to think like they're thinking or understand why they are thinking certain ways. And then what's a shame is I do see a lot of riders now that they just want to get on at the ring and treat them like an inanimate object. And that's really difficult to see. Being a rider is not just about riding them in the horse show. It's about spending the time with them back at the barn and knowing what's going on in their heads and what the horses are feeling. I think the better bond you have with them, the more they'll do for you, and the more you can think what's going to bother them and what they like and what they don't like. And then I think that they try harder for you. You know, you build a good, strong bond with them and they like you, they're going to try a lot harder for you than if they don't like you. It's just kind of common sense or horse sense.
This,
Hopefully,
this,
hopefully
this,
the youth people, the youth people will see this program and will hear you very clear, my friend. Thank you
Well, I
for
hope they
this
do.
analysis that you did now.
They're missing a lot too. There's so much. They give you so much more than just showing them in the ring. If you spend time with them at the barn, it's very, very enlightening. It means a lot to you as a rider too. That connection, that bond is very important, not just sitting on their backs up at the ring. And I think it's important for everybody to have.
we
Carolo,
talking a lot. We talking to finish this. Give me a chance. We talking a lot about welfare of the horse and the type of classes, the type of competition we have today. We lose, for example, a lot of the puissants. No more. And you are a very good rider of puissants, and you're jumping a lot of big fences in your life. And I think this even helping the horses to have a bigger heart and jumping big fences and when you have a good communication with the horse, you can jump in huge fences with not a big problem. And what do you think about this? But I know you, for example, in the years ago in the circuit of the North American in the indoors, they have a puissant in every show, and you was one of the only ones to jump in three of the puissants and jumping 7'1" walls and 236 fences. What this do you think this is bad for the horses or this is okay for the horses to jumping these big fences?
When we were riding at indoors, we were riding for the team. And Frank, that was always part of the team competition too. There were points during the week or during the indoor shows. And Frank always wanted someone to do the puissance, that if you had a horse that was capable to help get get points for the horses, you know, for the team for the week, for the team championship and so forth. And he also believed that the horses, he said back in his day, the horses normally jump better after jumping a big wall. They would come back and jump better. And all the horses years ago used to do both the Puissance and the Grand Prix. He said they did it all the time years ago. I don't know if it was necessarily good for them, but I know with Daydream and some other horses I had, they would jump better in the other classes after doing the Puissance. I was probably too young to know better than to know what I couldn't do, and the horses didn't know what they couldn't do, and I was a bit of a daredevil, so I loved the chance to jump a big wall. It was very exciting, and it was a thrilling feeling to have the horse trust you enough to go down to a big wall like that. Daydream tried to break the indoor record twice, and just that the connection you have that he would go down there and try it, because when you go down to that wall, they have to trust you because they don't know what they're jumping into. You can't see on the other side. So it was kind of exhilarating for me to try it, and it was a great feeling that the horse trusted me enough to go down there and try and jump it, and that he wasn't going to land in some hole or ditch on the other side. But he always jumped better in other classes afterwards. I did try a lot of other horses in the Puissance, and they necessarily, not all of them liked it. They would try it, but some horses had more heart about it than others. And some horses were not capable of jumping big as easily. And I think the ones that had a hard time jumping it and maybe landed too much on their front end, I think for those it was probably a little hard on their legs. And I think with the horses getting so expensive and valuable at this point, that it's kind of gone away a little bit from the jumping because people are afraid they're going to get hurt. But I do have to say, I never had a horse get hurt in a Puissance class. And I've done probably over 15 to 20 at least with different horses, and I never had a horse get hurt doing the Puissance. So I don't know that there's more risk, but I think with a certain type of horse there probably is.
I have a video here that we're going to share with Daydream jumping clear in Washington International. So, Alex, can you put the video, please? Let me, if you can share your thoughts, what crossed through your mind when you had to face that wall?
I was excited about it. I thought Daydream could jump a building if I headed him at it. You know, he had so much scope. And like I said, I rode him since he was 5 years old, so I felt like he would try anything for me. And I felt like he was really capable of jumping it. He attempted the record twice. And I think the first time, both of us got maybe a little excited about it because the crowd was so into it that we had the wall down. I got a little bit flat to it. And another year when he tried it, he barely he rode fantastic to it. And he actually cleared it. He kicked up so high at the top of it, he missed it with his legs, but he barely touched it with his stifle. And just one little piece of the wall came down. So here I was just making sure. Daydream was a little bit of a slower type horse and a little bit colder than he looks. And so I had to make sure that he was going forward and had enough impulsion going to the wall. And unlike some of the other horses, he did like a little more room at the wall. He could jump it. That one he hit. That's than that. But a lot of them he jumped easily. That one's maybe the one time I got a little bit deeper than he was. Some horses like it to get there with a lot of energy really collected. I had different riders help me explaining how to ride down to it. But Daydream did like a little more of a gap at the wall because he was a little bit slow with his front end, and he was great jumper behind. This was before anyone used the hind boots, and he never hit anything behind. I just always had to watch his front end because he was a little bit large and a little bit slower with the front end, but his hind end was great. So for him, I was better with a little bit of room at the wall. But he was so scopy that I think given the right ride, he could have jumped 8 foot if he had the right ride to it. And it was an amazing feeling going down to it with him, trusting him completely that he could jump whatever. He was an amazing horse. He actually, after he did that wall, he almost won the Grand Prix the next day. He would have been the only horse to ever win the Puissance and the Grand Prix in the same weekend at Washington. And he was double clean in the Grand Prix, but I slipped in the jump off and it slowed me down by a half second. So he was second in the Grand Prix the next day. And for a horse that's not really suited for indoors, because he was a big, long, kind of a slower type horse, it was difficult for him to do the Grand Prix in a small ring like Washington. But I think doing the puissance really helped him.
Well, we have another video that we want also to share. That is it's an icon horse show, which I know it was very meaningful to you because it was in Miami at the Dolphin Stadium. I know you are sponsored by one of the Dolphins player. So I don't think it's ever going to happen again because the groundkeeper, like we said before, is not very happy with the results of the ground, thanks to us. But here we have this video that I think is going to be very interesting and good history of our sport. Alex.
When I was growing up, the Invitational was my favorite class to watch. Free just so I could watch the top riders, and it was one of the big deal classes that we all wanted to qualify for the year. You never got to see the jumps. As you can see, the jumps are quite spooky. They always did a very special job. They used jumps that they only used for the American Invitational, and it was in a football stadium. It was always packed. Royce was very young at this point. This was his first time going really in this kind of stadium, and the courses were difficult. The type of jumps were hard. They were always big and scopy type jumps. And being from Miami and being in my hometown, I was just excited to even be there. Unfortunately, the footing in Miami wasn't as good as in Tampa, but it's the first time they ever had it there. And it was just an amazing feeling. I always loved the Invitational. That was a very scopy triple bar Oxford two stride to a very delicate skinny jump afterwards. And Royce is amazing with his scope that he was able to do that easily. He's making it look a lot easier than it was. You could see right there where the ground kind of gave way and he would just jump higher. But he's an amazing athlete, and I have so much respect and confidence in him that he'll try whatever. And even when you could see he was getting a little bit backed off because the ground was giving away, but like there was scoping to a very delicate double of verticals, and then you had to really come forward to that last Oxford. The course was fantastic. I think Steve Stevens did the course, which he normally did for the Invitational, and he did a great job. It was very challenging, and the crowds loved it. It was always fun to go to because they get a huge crowd. And being from Miami, I always felt a special feeling. It would give you a little bit of a boost with all the spectators and all the crowd behind you. So it was always a good feeling being a hometown girl. And Bob Greasy, who is a hero in Miami forever. He's in the Hall of Fame. He was a quarterback for the Dolphins when they have their 17-0 season. So being in the Invitational there with his name up there as being one of the Hall of Famers, it was very special feeling for me too, because they're very, very good friends. Besides being good owners for me, they've been very good friends for many years. They've been clients and friends for over 30 years. And I've ridden horses for them forever. So to see his name up in the stadium as one of the Hall of Famers when the Dolphins had their 17-0 season and won the Super Bowl, that was exciting. And just being in Miami, it was just a fantastic event. One of my favorites, for sure.
Everyone. Not only for you, it was a great experience for all of us. It was amazing.
The crowds loved it. And I know when we were young kids, when it was at Tampa, we would do anything to go up and watch all the top riders in the Invitational. If we had to hitch a ride, we'd offer to groom for free, sleep in the trucks or the trailers, anything we could just so we could watch the American Invitational. It was so exciting for us to watch. I mean, you never get to go in the ring until that minute. And people don't see the schooling areas are not always ideal in those football stadiums. We had a tiny little schooling area that the horses warm up is not the most ideal. But once you go into the stadium, the feeling is exhilarating. It's just really exciting.
Carolo, you have a question?
Margie, years ago, you won the Grand... Sigue, Leo.
I had the chance to working in that night. I working there with Steve Stevens. We do that year. Is the only year that Steve do it with somebody, and we working together in that Grand Prix. And I want to say that Steve Stevens do a fantastic job. He did it for years and years and years, and he is a super good core designer, and he do fantastic fences, and the variety of material that have in the American Invitational make the difference that any other show maybe in the state and in the world. But Steve put the big effort in decoration and a fantastic material. The material that we see there every year, I feel very bad that don't see the American Invitational again for other years. I think the American Invitational and Steve need to come back and do it again in the future, and will be very good for the sport in the United States. The sport need to do an effort to come back and do in one of these stadiums. I don't know if in the Dolphin again or in another stadium or come back to Tampa, but they need to do it again. This is my opinion. What do you think about it?
I'd be all for it. That was, since I was probably 9 or 10 years old, that was my favorite class of the year. I couldn't wait to, when I was too young, I couldn't go to see it, so I'd watch it on TV. That was back when it used to be on ESPN. They used to tape all those because August Bush used to sponsor it. So it was always on TV, but it was a Budweiser American Invitational, and it was just unbelievable to watch. Like you said, the material he used was special only for those classes. There were jumps you never saw till that you went into the ring at that time, and they were beautiful. The decoration of every single jump was unbelievable. The crowds, to be able to go into a football stadium of places we had only seen football games, and in our country, horses were not as popular. Football was always the big sport. So to be able to walk in and have Equestrian in a football stadium and with big crowds like that was exhilarating. It was just unbelievable, and it was such a special event. And I think all the riders were really very excited to go in there. And like the type of material you said, like you say, it's so different. He had some delicate stuff, but some really big solid jumps. The horses had to be brave but rideable. They asked every question you can think of. And as a rider and horse combination, it was so challenging, but good challenging. You felt really like you accomplished something just to jump around the Invitational. And even if you had 4 faults, that was an accomplishment. But just to go in there and jump in that stadium was an amazing feeling. I would love to see that come back. There's 2 events that were amazing that showed real bravery in both horse and rider. That, and we used to have the jumping derby that was in Rhode Island, and that was similar to, I think Pamela Carruthers came and actually designed it like the Hickstead Derby, and there was every kind of natural jump and big solid jumps, and probably some of the biggest jumps I've done. Those 2 events, I would love to see something like that come back. I think it'd be great for the sport. People, the spectators love watching that.
I think the sport with the new way of doing, McLean give it to us in his program here. He say the sport come a little bit boring today with this type of material, and this type of competition always are the same, and you have everybody clean 4, clean 8, 4, clean. I think we need more excitement with different material and different surprises. But today, the sport lose this meaning, the surprise. When you arrive into the show or to the competition and you see different things, it's a surprise for the rider, surprise for the crowd, surprise for everybody. I think we lose a lot of this. What do you think about it?
Oh, for sure. And one thing that the spectators love doing before the class, they'd let the riders walk the course, and then they had maybe an hour where the people that were spectating got to go down to walk the course, and when the course was over. and they loved it. They would go around and ask to take pictures. They couldn't believe the size of the jumps and the material and how solid they were looking, and just one jump at a time, they were in awe of how amazing the jumps all looked. And I remember one year there were these big walls with big holes in them, and they were all taking pictures of them sitting themselves inside, and the jumps were taller than not just me, but most of the other normal sized people. And they loved taking pictures by all these jumps. But they, like you said, they had jumps that we had never seen before, and the horses hadn't seen. So it was different. But I don't know, even with the 4.488, I never think our sport is boring. But I think that's definitely something that the spectators really, really enjoyed. And they would, all those kind of courses, they would love to come down and walk and see the jumps themselves. It was like really exciting for them to even have their pictures taken next to the jumps. Same at the jumping derby. They couldn't believe the type of jumps. It was a cross between kind of eventing jumps, but at Grand Prix height, and long, an endurance test too. And they loved taking their pictures by all these different jumps. And they were huge and big, solid jumps and all different. And again, they were jumps we didn't see until you were there. But the spectators loved that. And when people didn't get around, there were some big crashes. So they kind of enjoyed seeing that factor too, which maybe not all the riders like, but the spectators do like to see that also. But it's your question as far as the
César, el
invitational.
Yeah. So we're already over the hour. So Carolo, do you have anything to add before we say thank you to Margie? Because I know she still has like 4 horses to ride. So
Thank you very much. Margie, I want to hear you something about one of your horses, Cuervo Gold. Okay, this horse was previously ridden by a very big friend of mine, Paquito Caldeira, a Portuguese rider. What can you tell us about this horse?
You know, it's funny. He always gets lost. No one ever remembers him. And he jumped quite well at Aachen a couple times. And he did the WEG there and was on the team that won the silver medal when we were with the U.S., I think, just at Aachen, which is another fantastic facility and horse show that's at top of everyone's list. But I had bought him originally. Hidden Creek Farm bought him originally just as a sales horse. Everyone told me he wasn't quick enough. He was very scopy and very honest, and he wasn't the fastest horse, but he'd be a great horse for an amateur that wanted to jump bigger jumps and to sell, because he was always very brave and very kind. They said he was really strong. It was funny. I remember. I'm not sure who rode him. Who rode him before I got him? I thought it was. Who did you say rode him
Paco
before?
Caldeira. Paco Caldeira,
Okay,
Portuguese rider.
And did one of the Philipparts have him also as a young horse? I thought Ludo had him or somebody.
Maybe, but he took part in the European Championship of Donaueschingen, I think. The horse with Paquito Caldeira.
Well, because I got him from Mario Piasecki, that I think he was still owned by the other rider. But I mainly had my owners buy him as a sales horse for I want to sell him as a junior amateur horse. And because again, he always had, when I looked at, not with, I don't know with the other rider, but with Mario, he had time faults a lot. And so I rode him. I told Mike he's for sure scopy, maybe not the fastest horse, but he learned to get quick. He got much quicker. He won. I got to show him in the World Cup finals when it was in Kuala Lumpur, and he was in the top 6, finished in that, and he was even, I think, in the top 6 in the speed phase, which I would have never said at the beginning he could do. He was always scopy, always brave, had a great temperament. Maybe he was a little bit like a lot of the Jus de Pommes, maybe not the best mouth, a little bit strong, but he was always going forward and had all the jump. And the only thing that he lacked, he was maybe not the quickest, but he got quicker over time. He won quite a few Grand Prix and had to go fast in the jump offs. But originally we got him just to turn over quickly for junior amateur horse. And then when he started doing well, Mike said, oh, maybe I'll keep him and we'll do the do him in some championships. And he won our championships that year. But that's back when we had to do qualifying events to get into you had to qualify for the team. It wasn't just picked. So during our trials, he won the whole trials. I don't even think he had to do the last round because he was so far ahead from all the rounds we did. And our trials, I was telling Leopoldo the other day, they were probably bigger than what the events we were going to were going to be. But he jumped around those easy. His scope was amazing. And I ended up selling him later in his career. I think he was probably 16. Ian Miller bought him for a client of his, and he did the Grand Prix. She bought him to do the amateurs, but she did some Grand Prix with him also. And he went till he was, I think, close to 20 or maybe even a little older. But he was a great horse. I loved his color too. He was almost had a flaxen mane and tail, and he was a kind of chest that almost looked Palomino, but he was a beautiful color and great temperament. Just really very easygoing, very brave. He could have jumped a lot of derbies. I think, didn't he even do some derbies before I got him? I think
I don't know.
He was one of the few horses I actually got, though, that had already done big classes. And we originally just bought him to resell. But he ended up being a better horse than we originally thought, which is always a good surprise.
Good.
You know, Margie, I think you're the first person that asks a question to Carolo and he answers, I don't know. I mean, this is going for the records because he knows the answers of every question about horses, breeding, competition. First, I heard said, I don't know. Incredible. All right. Well, Margie,
I'm
I
probably
want
going
to
to
let
offend someone.
Santiago. Oh, yeah, exactly. So, Santi, your final remarks to Margie and Leopoldo also, so we can close.
I don't have many things to add. Only I would like to thank you, and hopefully the youth people hear you very clear and how they need to do with their horses and how they need to approach with this sport. Because from today, this is the clear lesson, the lesson that they need to learn. And thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate what you all do. Like I said, I think you all have one of the hardest jobs at the horse show, and I love jumping all of your courses, and especially the ones that make us think. So I appreciate all the work that you all do. There's a lot of homework that goes into that, and a lot of hard effort, and the riders do appreciate it. Even though we complain sometimes, we do appreciate it.
This is the life.
I was going
Everyone
to
has
say
to
that
complain a
sometimes complain.
Margie, thank you for coming to the program. We feel very proud to have you here. You as a lady on this sport that all the life give it the best for the crowd, the best for the sport. And really thank you to come to the show, and we are very happy to have you here.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, and I always the excitement I have on course is not always maybe good excitement, but at least sometimes it's thrilling in the wrong way. But I do try anyway.
Well,
Margie,
Margie,
I know, sorry, you know how to speak some Spanish, so muchas gracias.
Gracias to you, senor. I know un poco solamente.
well, Margie, thank you very much. You're a great ambassador of the sport, and I'm sure that a lot of people are going to enjoy this program as we did here. So thank you again, and we want to wish you the best luck and all the best results now in Traverse City. So thank you to Ecuestre Digital, Mariela and Estefania Godoy for all the subtitles, because this program is going to be available also with the Spanish subtitle, and Carolo with Cavalarium.com. So thank you, Margie, again. All the best, and we see you soon in the next show. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.